Hello, and welcome to Construction Executive's Professional Education Series. You have joined our webinar titled Beyond the Fear, Why Digital Disruption is Good for Your Construction Business, sponsored by CMiC. My name is Maggie Murphy, and I'm the Managing Editor for Construction Executive, published by Associated Builders and Contractors. I'll be serving as a moderator of the presentation. As a reminder, we'll send a copy of the slides and the recording of this presentation to everyone within a few days. If you have any questions that pop into your head during this presentation, please type them in the questions box at your right and go to webinar, and we will address them at the end of the presentation during our Q&A session. In today's webinar, I'll be moderating a discussion with our panel of experts on the tech disruption conundrum, remote work, connected teams, and dealing with disruption, how to attract and retain talent, elevating safety standards, and building a resilient organization. And now I'd like to introduce the panelists for today's webinar. Chris Larson is the Director of Information Technology at R.A. Nelson LLC in Avon, Colorado. He is an experienced technologist with more than 17 years managing technologies and teams across many different industries. He started with the company in 2014 and has revamped the entire R.A. Nelson IT infrastructure, including being the project sponsor and internal project manager for implementing CMiC in 2016.
Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Thanks, Chris. Next, we have Steve Cangiano. Steve Cangiano is the Director of Product Management at CMiC. He began his career at CMiC as a solutions consultant before moving on to play a bigger role in shaping the next generation of cloud products for the company. Today, he manages a team of product managers focused on building the company's product portfolio for the construction industry.
Hi, everyone. Looking forward to our discussion.
Thanks, Steve. And finally, we have Matt Abels, who is the Vice President of Construction Technology and Innovation for ABC National. In his role, he is responsible for educating and innovating ABC members nationally through multiple mediums. He also collaborates with the tech community, especially in his effort with the ABC Tech Alliance, to bring exclusive education and resources to ABC's members and chapters.
Hi, Maggie. Thank you for having me today and looking forward to the discussion with everybody.
Thanks, Matt. So I mentioned all the topics that we're going to be discussing today, and the first thing that we'd like to jump right in with is the tech disruption conundrum. So let's start off by defining what digital disruption means for the construction industry and what technology and factors are driving this. And Matt, did you want to start us off?
Yeah, I think a few things to know. Right now, if you look at construction as a whole, I think one thing that's forgotten sometimes, especially when we're talking about technology, is that 97% of construction businesses are composed of less than 100 people. And I say that because innovation really means different things to different people. So when you look at most of those businesses, they're not looking at robotics and augmented reality. A lot of times they're looking for ways to make their processes more efficient, move out of Excel, enhance their estimating processes, their CRM systems. But I think right now the industry is changing a lot. It's a really exciting time to be in construction. And I think sometimes we forget, people forget we are a $10 trillion industry that is about as innovative as the hunting industry. We've got a ways to go, but the tech disruption is happening in a positive way for our industry, and I'm excited to be a part of this industry, and where kind of I'm at with ABC to help raise the bar a little bit, if you will.
Thanks, Matt. Steve, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I think Matt had some great points, and maybe my perspective is a little bit more geared towards the software end of things. That's what I do for a living personally. And I think that some of the things that we're seeing, as software developers that are focused on the construction industry, what we see, in terms of how we would define the digital disruption and what it means for construction specifically is, I think we would define digital disruption as the availability of technology in a way that we haven't seen before. The availability of cloud applications that can be purchased and implemented even at the project level in some cases to solve problems, and the speed of which we can adapt those applications and make them work for our unique situations is really quite unique. It's quite new, and it's something we've only really seen over the last maybe 5 to 7 years. And then I would also add the ability to integrate those systems into your main ERP platform or other point solutions via APIs has totally changed the ability for the data that's captured with these point solutions to ultimately make their way back to hopefully some kind of central platform that the company can then ultimately report on and use that data to make better decisions. So just to recap, I think that the availability of cloud applications, massive impact on our ability to be really responsive to what the business requirements are, and the availability of these APIs and these integrations that are very common between these tools let us capture those data from those point solutions and then ultimately make better decisions with that data.
Great, thanks for that, Steve. Chris, from the contractor perspective, what do you have to share?
Oh, I would agree with both of these gentlemen. The industry over the last 10 years has just seen a tremendous amount of technology being thrown at it. If you look back at analysis, construction was one, and probably still is one of the industries that's behind the 8 ball within technology. But with all of the new companies that are out there that are throwing different platforms and different technology to small medium business enterprise solutions, there's so much out there, and you have to do your due diligence to research it to make sure that you're implementing the right thing and not just putting in a shiny car when you don't need it.
Sure, thanks for that perspective, Chris. I think that brings us to our first poll question. So I will hand it off to Matt to introduce that question and read the answer choices.
So for our first poll question today, what do you view technology adoption accelerating over the next 1 to 2 years? Significantly, moderately, or business as usual? While people are answering, Chris, one thing I would mention, you make such a good point about there's such an overwhelming amount of technology right now. Understanding what you need is the most important piece. With everything coming out, one of the reasons, like for ABC, for example, and we're trying to support 21,000 members, we've tried to understand their needs, and we've built a marketplace that covers some of those technologies in the categories that they're looking at. But nonetheless, they still need to look at technology, do their due diligence, understand what their problems are, because one thing that's lost sometimes is you don't just buy a technology and you make a profit or your job site's automatically safer. It's there's due diligence, there's having a plan, and some of it just goes to people and process. But it's so important, So anyway.
I would completely agree. And anytime that you make a software decision, I truly hope that you have done a discovery on multiple platforms that are in the same realm, that you talk to current customers of that software application. You look at the return on investment and what the cost is, and when you may cross that ROI line, and you have stakeholder ownership and acceptance.
Yep.
Because truly, from an IT perspective and being the director of information technology for R.A. Nelson, anytime that we put in a solution in place, I am not the one that's making the decision. It is a team of people who turn into the product experts that know the business inside and out more than I do that lead to the decision on what software we go with.
Makes sense. So we have the answers, and it looks like we have 53% said significantly, 44% said moderately, and 4% said business as usual. And look, I hope that everyone, the majority looked at significantly, and my hope is that everyone continues to understand that this is going to be a significant impact and prepare properly for it. You're seeing more chief innovation officers and chief technology officer positions come into construction, and I think you're going to see that that growing as time goes on for reasons that this poll showed us.
Great, thanks for those insights, all of you. So we'll just go ahead and move forward with our next question. Steve, you can start us off with this one. Why should construction companies embrace technology at the core of their business?
Yeah, thanks, Maggie. I'm going to kind of continue on maybe the similar trend that I had mentioned in the first question. And I think a lot of this really comes down to data and what companies can do with data. I mean, you look at other industries, whether it's finance, retail, insurance, even manufacturing, quite a bit over the last few years. It's hugely focused on data as an asset. And I think that the construction industry is starting to look more and more at the data that they're capturing. I think historically, a lot of the forms that were filled out and the information that was entered into systems was, to track things and maybe from a legal perspective to make sure things were well documented in case there was a problem. But another benefit of that is that there's such a wealth of information that's available to a lot of construction companies that maybe they're not really tapping into. But as more and more construction companies start becoming more data focused and making, basically, taking the data out of the silos of their point solutions and trying to put it into some kind of a warehouse or some sort of a platform that lets them report on it, that data will ultimately become, I think, one of the most important assets that the construction industry has when they're going out to bid their next job. Whether it's something more practical to say, what kind of margins can we expect on certain trades in certain regions, or how can we work more safely? Where do we tend to have accidents? In what scenarios have these things occurred? You see some amazing stuff happening with even computer vision and looking at job site photos and making sure that everyone is wearing their PPE or monitoring job site cameras that are actively monitoring the project. So I really think it all comes down to capturing even more data and taking advantage of the solutions that are out there to do great things with the data. And I think it should be looked at as a currency, the way that other industries are looking at the data and really putting a huge value to it.
Thanks, Steve. Chris, what else do you have to share in that regard from the contractor perspective?
Well, being in the year 2021, we're definitely not going to go back to pen and paper. All of us in the industry, I think, are trying to move into applications that can streamline and make efficiencies within our business so that we can turn that into really what it comes down to is revenue by having those efficiencies. The analytics, like Steve was talking about with the data, opens up so many eyes to be able to find those fine detailed items and be able to present that to the C-suite, senior leadership team, whatever it may be, so that decisions can be made on what needs to be changed and how the growth can move forward, but still have that analytical look year after year.
Sure. And Matt, you mentioned ABC's 21,000 members. Obviously, they range from very small to some very large companies. What thoughts do you have to share in regards to your work with the ABC members?
I think when it comes to embracing technology, my main focus is the small to mid-sized contractors, and the reason I say that is because if you look at the contractors that are half a billion dollars plus, they typically have resources that can look into technologies on a daily basis that are going to help them. I think you have to get a little more resourceful as a mid-size or especially a small-size business. And I think you shouldn't just embrace technology to embrace technology. I think the most important part is to do your due diligence and look at what are the challenges that your company has, and then from there see, okay, is there technology that helps us? And then selecting the best technology to address some of those issues, strategizing a rollout to kind of, to meet the needs. And look, there may be a great tech solution for some of those problems, there may not, but at least understanding where technology is going to benefit you. I think that's that's really the first big part. And in kind of going down that journey, because like I said, the bigger companies do have some of these resources. I think there is, and I know we're talking a little bit about this a little later on culture, but I think it's important to identify leaders within the, your organization, your company to help lead the process, get buy-in for the process. I know Chris mentioned this earlier, but that is beyond important to have guys who are dealing with the problem firsthand collectively come to the table and, go back to what I mentioned before, identify those problems. And then, I think I think one thing I hit on a lot is it's important to let your team be a part of the full process to get feedback, and to when it comes to technology, I think it's important to celebrate those small wins. I think that sometimes it gets lost in how hard it is to implement or bring on a new technology, large or small, and I think that helps everybody.
Thanks, Matt. My background is actually coming from a small general contractor, and I know that for many of these smaller companies, the rate at which these technological advances are coming is so fast that it can be overwhelming for a lot of them to know where to start. So I know one thing you mentioned right off the bat is just making sure that you have that buy-in from your employees. So for these small to mid-sized companies, what are the next best practices and advice that you would give for the first steps to embracing this technology?
I think for me, there's a few things. Number one, I think starting small, test the technology on one or two projects before rolling it out across all jobs. I think, as you mentioned, getting buy-in from everybody, especially the end user, is very key. Assigning someone, to be a technology champion, to who's responsible to successfully implement the technology is really important. That just goes to accountability. If everyone is responsible for something, no one's responsible for it. So I think that champion is key. And again, I can't stress enough. I think especially now, celebrating small wins is important in doing this. There's a lot of hurdles that technology can create. So celebrating those small wins, and one thing that you'll get with that is improved culture and improved efficiency. And ideally, technology should help you make your job site safer, win you more work, and make you more profitable. So anyway, that would be my recommendation.
Sure. And Chris, what are some of those small wins that you would celebrate as a contractor, and what would be your best tips to give folks looking to get started?
Oh, small wins. Man, there's so many. Like even putting out like just an added piece of functionality within the systems that you use. So if it's, for instance, we utilize CMiC as our ERP for financial and project management system. And we're in the process right now of rolling out an employee self-service module that they have, to where an employee can go in and update their own information and submit their time, get paycheck stubs, put in a digital PTO request. And so small wins like that, to be able to where you can cut down on communication through email and have it be digitalized and then recorded within the system, is just one example of a small win for us. I agree. I agree with Matt wholeheartedly that the small wins and getting people on board is key. One item that I've done with RA Nelson is I've taken some of our respected people in the field and have done extensive training with them on technology, and then let them go in the field, and then it just trickles down because people look up to them and trust them more than, say, an IT director. And so it's a win-win for the field, for the employees, and for the company.
Great insights there, Chris. Thank you. Steve, what did you have to share?
Yeah, I mean, just maybe I agree with the points that Matt and Chris made, and just maybe to take it from a little bit of a different perspective, is sometimes I think it's helpful for any project, I mean, especially something related to technology, is to kind of think about, you know, as the leader of that initiative, whether you're in a small or even a large organization, being able to focus on what am I looking to achieve? What kind of experience do I want to have for my end users? Do I want my end users to be able to use Chris' example, to be able to retrieve their pay stubs on their phone without having to email or, you know, go see HR to get that information? Do I want them to be able to enter time? Do I want them to be able to, you know, view their drawings on their iPad or whatever it might be, and try and work backwards from there and figure out where the technology can facilitate that. Sometimes I find we're using technology for the sake of using it because it's cool. You know, we're going to use the HoloLens and walk through a model because it's awesome. Of course, you know, no one's going to say that's not cool. That's super cool. But is that really like the core of what we need at this stage? So I think, you know, getting as many stakeholders as possible involved and just saying, like, you know, forget the technology for a second. What is it you want to be able to do? And then we can try and fit the technology where it'll fit to meet that requirement.
All right. Thanks all of you for sharing insights on this first topic. I think that about wraps it up for us on the tech disruption conundrum. So we will go ahead and move forward to our second topic, which is remote work, connected teams, dealing with disruption, and creating standardized processes. So to start us off here, what are the steps that companies can take today to prevent major disruptions, regardless of the circumstances of those disruptions? Steve, do you want to lead us off here?
Yeah, and I guess maybe I'll provide my own definition of kind of like a disruption. I think about the topic framework of like remote work, connected teams, dealing with disruption, standardized process. I look at that as like an interruption of service, right? Something where we're not able to compete, we're not able to complete a core process or something a critical task because there's some kind of a disruption because of either the technology failing or the process failing or what have you. And how do we try to, you know, prevent these things from happening too frequently? I think, you know, first and foremost, like a well-documented process of who is responsible for what in different scenarios is very key. My personal experience, you know, managing a team, maybe not working on construction projects, but I think there's a lot of similarities when you have, you know, large groups of people that say, okay, at this step in the process, you know, somebody out of this group of 15 people will take the next step and we'll execute the next step in the process. My personal experience is having, you know, as many specific people as part of the process that have been tasked with completing the next step. Oftentimes makes it very clear for everybody who is responsible for what. Of course, people need backups. Of course, people need options to escalate in certain scenarios, but I think having a very specific process that people follow oftentimes leads to the most consistency. When we're talking about technology, I think that major cloud providers have really stepped their game up in terms of high availability. You know, the availability of, you know, some of the most critical Office, you know, as an example, Office 365 as a critical SaaS component of many people's businesses. Sure, it may have its occasional outages, but it's a very solid offering and perhaps much more solid than if you were hosting that internally and having to manage a lot of that yourself. So on the technology side, leveraging the cloud solutions as much as possible. They're just continuing to get more and more stable over time. And from a process perspective, try to keep your responsibility to smaller groups of people and make sure it's really clear on what exactly they need to do, and how they can escalate things when things don't go well.
All right, thanks for that. Matt, I'll hand it off to you.
Yeah, I think when we're talking about kind of I look at this as a topic that is really top of mind for a lot of people during the pandemic, and I don't want to highlight that too much. I think everyone has heard enough webinars and information about hurdles they've dealt with during COVID, but I think there is a silver lining. I think we as an industry have been forced to adopt to technology, especially when it comes to remote work and connected teams. So what's happened is I don't think a lot of contractors were using Zoom before. I think you'll find that many of them have not only learned about it, but embraced it. And when it comes to, and it's just, that's one of many tools that's allowing people to connect better, to communicate better. But this also goes back to understanding what are the needs that your business has, and to prevent major disruptions, you need everyone connected, understanding, and on the same page. When you look at things like how are we embracing progress on job sites during such a time, I don't think it's a coincidence that there are companies that allow for job site monitoring off-site are doing very well. Companies like Struction Site, Open Space, Hollow Builder, that allow multiple stakeholders to understand what's going on a job site in almost in really up to date timely fashions. This is those types of technologies that allow for not just communication but collaboration and keeping everyone connected. It's important, but again, this goes back to something that I think we all hit on before, is being aware of tools that can help us get through these hurdles. And there is a need for more education, awareness, and understanding of these tools and technologies on one hand, and then the second piece is making sure that everyone at every company is ready to tackle these hurdles together for the betterment of everyone.
Great insights there, Matt. And Chris, what did you have to share?
I don't know if there's really anything else I can add. Steve and Matt nailed it right on the head. It's all about disaster recovery. And so when you get into these disruptions, you have to have standard operation procedures in place to have your fallback, to know what you're going to do when they're not there. It's critical. It's critical. It's critical thinking, and it's thinking outside the box when we get into these areas. But both gentlemen had awesome points.
Sure, thanks, Chris. And this next question actually seems like perfect to start off with you as the IT guy in your company. With so much of the workforce being remote in light of COVID, how can construction companies equip their workforces to be effective even when they're remote, beyond just the basic computers and connectivity infrastructure?
2 points: training and communication. Training side, make sure that your employees and workforce are set up for success right out of the box. As an industry, we tend to put people and have them learn by trial by fire. We need to stop that. We need to have better training in place so that these people go into the field, regardless of how much or how long they've worked in the industry. Each company has different processes. So if a super comes from one company to another, yeah, they may have super experience, but they may not have what your SOP is. And then the second thing is communication. In today's age, and I know we've briefly talked about COVID, and I don't want to get into it because I think it expands outside of COVID. We need to communicate as much as possible if things are going to change or if there is going to be a disruption. not only in technology, but if there's going to be a disruption on a job site because of something else. And so just keeping people informed, large or small, I think is huge.
Those are both great points, Chris. Thank you. Steve, what would you have to recommend for folks looking to keep their remote workforces effective?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a challenge no matter, what industry you happen to fall in, whether you're, a software developer, or whether you're a general contractor. And it's something that I think we have a lot of very similar scenarios in common. And I can definitely agree with Chris's points. Effective training and onboarding is very difficult no matter what industry you fall in. And companies that do it really well and invest in that really well, they end up having new productive employees much, much faster than others. And I know that's something even at CMiC, we've invested very heavily over the last couple of years on internal employee training and onboarding in a way that we hadn't done so before. And the results have been really positive. So yeah, the training and the onboarding process is definitely something that needs to be invested in. In our organization, we have 2 full-time employees. We're not a massive software company, but we're smaller, but we have 2 full-time employees that their entire jobs are to focus on onboarding and training content for our new employees, and it's each manager's responsibility to get them there. One thing I'll add that's different, maybe a different thought process or what have you, when you're dealing with a true remote workforce, and we're now hiring a lot more people even internationally to work on our teams, and I think having regular cadence touch points with every team member you have needs to be something set as a standard from the management team. And that's something that we've even adopted internally, is that you need to be reaching out and at least having some touch points with your direct reports as close to on a daily basis as possible if time permits. Because especially if everyone is working remotely long term, and we've been doing this for over a year, taking advantage of the technology to turn on the webcam and have a conversation with another person and not work by yourself, and take advantage of just sending a couple of IMs back and forth just to keep in touch. The soft side of the work and the job is having somebody out there that you're collaborating with on a regular basis, and we've kind of tasked all of our managers with that responsibility, that you're having a constant communication with your team, and taking advantage of tools like Microsoft Teams, whether it be Zoom or just a regular phone call. But it becomes so much more important to retain great people when they're feeling that they're being valued and that they're up to speed with what's happening in the rest of the organization.
I would agree with that from an employee standpoint, for sure. I think people always appreciate being personally checked in with, and I know that's hugely important to retaining a workforce, especially in this remote environment. So Matt, what other thoughts do you have to share on that?
I think we hit the main ones. I know we're covering a lot. I think the one point I would add is that it is, just to amplify what was just said, I think it really is so important to keep constant contact with your peers and your staff and your company, because just to give an example, in a remote workforce, things have changed. There are a lot of things that are good and that people have embraced technology, but one thing that is lost from not being, whether it's in office space or in person or on a job site with as many people, collaboration and creativity have gone down in the US, and I think people need to recognize that and make sure that they're making an extra effort to keep that collaboration at a good level. But I think those are some of the main things we're really hit already.
Great. Okay, thanks. So this is a great lead into our next topic, which is about attracting and retaining talent. So we want to talk a little bit about company culture and the role that technology plays in that culture. So Steve, what thoughts do you have to share on how contractors can best attract and retain a skilled workforce, and what kind of role does technology play?
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak from the perspective of an employer that brings on a lot of young people, the way that contractors even are today, are bringing out a lot of young project managers and project engineers, and what we found has worked really well. spending the time to find the projects or the roles that these new employees are best suited for has been really effective for us. You know, you might hire somebody on in a particular capacity, and you might decide that they might be better fits in other roles or in other projects, and just having the flexibility and even the honesty, you know, with that new employee of where they might be a better fit. And we've had a lot of, you know, really great experience bringing on employees in certain roles and moving them into others, and where they've been even more effective. So I think, you know, just being very flexible on where these people are going to fit well in the organization is super important to retaining a skilled workforce. But specifically to the technology part of it, I mean, you know, it's kind of a common thing that people are talking about now is, oh, the young people want to do everything on their phones. Okay, yeah, that's great. But at the same time, I think that, you know, new employees and employees that you really do want to retain, they want to maybe have an opportunity to participate in some of these decisions and kind of being invested in helping make things better in certain places. So, you know, if there's some new employees that have some skills, you know, maybe they have some experience creating reports or dashboards, or they have some experience working with like even some workflow engines or anything that might be able to be valuable. Take advantage of the people that are coming into your organization that might have some of these skills. Maybe they've worked with another contractor and they use a really great product. Well, take advantage of their experience working with that great product. Maybe you decide to pick it up yourselves and implement it in your organization. And we've seen that in many ways at CMiC, where, you know, whether it's a developer, whether it's you know, a new product manager or a consultant, everyone brings really interesting experience and kind of lessons learned from their previous organization. So when it comes to technology, if they have some experience and some interesting stories to share about how technology worked really well at another company, might be interesting to get their perspective on it. And that's, of course, going to give them a satisfaction that they're helping to affect change, and they're going to be invested in making sure that maybe that new piece of technology works well at your company, and attracting the people that you want to keep engaged at your company.
I think those are some really great points, Steve. And I think, you know, giving folks the opportunity, even as a new employee, to really take ownership of something certainly is something that's going to accelerate their you know, trajectory within the company. It's going to give them more buy-in, and they're going to want to stick around because they feel like they're really being valued, and, you know, the communication is very open, and that ownership is a great retention tool. Chris, what thoughts do you have to share here?
Both you guys brought up the key word, and that's ownership. Everybody wants to have that feeling of being acknowledged for putting something into place that's going to help the company out. And having that ownership is huge. And when you look at, you know, attracting and retaining talent, especially in today's day and age, they want the technology. They see the technology. They're out browsing and they come across stuff. Different vendors will happen to call project managers, superintendents. So they see this stuff. And as Steve was saying before, by having somebody that has prior experience with a particular technology, you know, look into that, see what it's going to do. We've done that within our Inofit. And it certainly has driven, you know, people's goodwill and feeling towards the company, because they are part of something, and it's not coming from a senior leadership team leader.
Great, thanks, Chris. And Matt, I know you working with ABC National, a large part of ABC National's mission is attracting and retaining skilled workers to the construction industry. So what thoughts do you have to share from that association perspective?
Well, I think when we're talking about attracting new, younger talent to construction, I think one thing that I always believe is something we need to do as an industry is we need to appear and act more innovative. So by that I mean you can't be a construction company where someone who grew up on smart devices their whole life walks in and they see fax machines and carbon paper all over the place. You're just not going to get young talent that way. You know, my 2-year-old can use an iPad better than my own mother. This is a reality of the world we live in today. But I think that there is some table stakes that, as an industry, we need to just be okay with and get to that level. Separately, I think one of the things we need to do, and this coming from the association perspective, I think we have some room for improvement on how we market ourselves as an industry. We are an awesome industry. We are innovating as an industry. You know, there are challenges with, that we have, for example, in just recruiting to places like high schools can be a little challenging, but as a whole, to all levels, I do think that we could do a better job of showing that we're an innovative, exciting, safe industry. And one thing we don't do a great job of is talk about opportunity. When there's a lot of talent, for example, there are a lot of people who are talented in computer development, in things that, roles where someone who is a video game developer could go to California, they could work for a video game company, they'd be a spoke on a wheel. Someone like that could come to construction and they could soar if those opportunities were showcased. And some of those more tech savvy opportunities do exist and they are growing in nature. But like I said, I think as an industry, we could market ourselves better to show those opportunities. And the other thing on retaining talent, this goes to the culture. One thing when it comes to technology I've seen work very well is what I call dual education. So you have a new generation coming in that knows technology very well. Having them teach the veterans about that technology is really advantageous because that works both ways. Those veterans teaching the younger generation about the trades, that's advantageous to them. So this dual education not only helps everyone get better, but it does, as a byproduct, create a better culture. And at least as far as a few things on tech, that's what I've seen that's worked. And going back to something that I think is big in our industry is there is I do a webinar series on diversity and innovation, and that is a role too. And it boils down to I think building a diverse workplace that challenges employees to grow professionally is really important, and kind of embrace this idea of collaboration and continuing to innovate. It can't just happen once. You need to have everyone contribute to a culture that is innovative and thinking about how they can empower their employees. There's a reason that my role is not VP of construction technology. It's construction technology and innovation, because as an industry we need to innovate. It's not just the technology. Sorry to be long-winded.
That's all right. That's great insights, Matt. Thank you. And I think this brings us to our second poll question. So Matt, if you want to go ahead and introduce that question.
Yeah. What new technology has your company implemented in the last 2 years? And some companies haven't implemented anything, but I'm curious, is it emerging technology, field software, back office software, or nothing yet? And I think in the last 2 years, many companies have gone through some sort of implementation of a new technology. But anyway, been interesting to see what you guys say.
I think maybe Chris, you want to start off?
Yeah, I can definitely do that. A lot, I can say from an RNL perspective. No, honestly, folks, I'll tell you that in 2016, when we implemented CMiC, we went from having 6 different applications that only 2 of them talked down to having 1. In that, and moving forward to have something that was all under one umbrella, where you could get real-time reporting and not have to wait for a process and then have to get it the next morning. In that time frame as well, you know, digital and electronic plans, added functionality within current applications that we have. We're striving, and even down even down to like evaluations and employer reviews. We've taken a look at what we can do with the technology and where it's going, made the right decisions for R.A. Nelson, and have embraced them and put them into our organization. Technology is not going away. It's only going to get better. And so it's a matter of time to where you either say, okay, hey, I've got to jump on board, or you can continue with it and you utilize it for your best practices within your organization.
Okay, thanks everyone for voting in that poll. Matt, if you want to just make a quick comment on the results there.
No, I think to see emerging tech, be the lowest, but it's nice to see that there are companies embracing emerging tech. I'm not surprised that field software was the biggest one. I think that's one of the technologies you're seeing being used most by mid and small size contractors, especially. Back office software some have had for a long time, but the emerging tech, to me that's exciting. I think it's great that we're on a path where some of this emerging technology is being used. And like I said, I don't think most of our businesses are at that level, but to me, it's encouraging to see that at least the folks on this call, that we have over a quarter that in some capacity are embracing emerging tech. If I were to ask this question 5 years ago, that would not be the case. And to highlight one of the things that, Chris just mentioned, technology is not going away. But what is happening too is that it's going to get more crowded, and it's going to become more important to do that due diligence we talked about before.
Thanks, Matt. I know we did have a couple more questions here in this workforce topic, but I want to make sure that we have plenty of time for our next topic. And I want to talk a little bit about elevating safety standards, because safety is and/or should be the #1 priority for every construction company. So in regards to safety and technology, what recent technological advances can be used to improve job site safety? And Chris, I'm going to hand this off to you first.
Sure. There's a number of different software applications out there that can help out. R.A. Nelson has looked at some of them. They're again popping up all over the place. But what we have done is we've utilized our current technology to make it as easy as possible for someone to report a safety issue if needed. And so we have a number of different ways to where we can report this and get it to the appropriate people through workflows, so that everybody that needs to be aware of a safety issue has been made aware.
That's great. Thanks, Chris. Steve, what are your thoughts in regards to these tech advances and how we can improve safety on the job site?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak from the perspective of maybe the software developer in this case, and some of the things that we've done. So to focus kind of purely on some of the tech changes that have been made available to us as developers, computer vision by far has given us probably some of the most interesting opportunities to build really interesting applications using computer vision. And I actually touched on it a little bit earlier in one of my other comments. But the ability to index thousands of progress photos and identify who are in these photos, and even in many cases identify whether they're wearing hard hats or not, whether they're wearing PPE or not. Now, the accuracy is obviously not 100% perfect, but imagine you get 10 potential hazards that get brought to your attention by machine learning and AI going through thousands of photos. Even if a few of them were false positives, it still gives you a huge leg up on identifying potential hazards maybe before they happen. The same thing could be said for live video, being able to categorize the subjects of a live video the same way I mentioned with a photo, and tag them appropriately. We see as a massive opportunity even within CMiC to do something with that, because we have a huge amount of data that's stored within our system, but we don't really have great ways of indexing it in a simple and really efficient manner in a way that it could be useful from a safety perspective. So we're super interested in what computer vision can do, and what it will ultimately enable us to write better apps that will hopefully bring more of these types of potential hazards to our customers' attention.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, some of that technology is just absolutely fascinating. The artificial intelligence that goes into bringing attention to those potential safety hazards. Matt, any further thoughts to share there?
Yeah, I think that, going back to what I said at the beginning of the webinar, I think it's important to note that you've got most businesses in construction that are really small or mid-sized contractors. And when I look, which is consistent with what our association is looking at, I think the biggest things we need to do, and this falls under not just safety, but many things, is we need to digitize processes. Just to digitize and track safety actions with tracking safety actions and just keeping things paperless, I think is really important. That would help a lot of companies with the safety side of things. And there's a lot of really amazing safety technologies out there that can help up the game. I think that everyone in the industry wants to continuously improve how we can do that. And even in safety technology, it's an overwhelming area, but you've got really cool safety technologies like ones that can measure job site conditions. You've got a lot of IoT or Internet of Things devices that can ensure that if someone gets hurt, that someone is notified right away. If there's an emergency on the job site, everyone is notified and people will get off the job quicker. And when you look at kind of the world we're in today, we do have some hurdles as it relates to COVID, and that being making sure that everyone who goes on a job site is safe. There's really cheap solutions to make sure that everyone takes a health screening, that everyone can take a temperature screen before they go to a job site, or even ensure they wear proper PPE gear. But I think just to look at what's in your budget and what would you like to do to improve safety, there's no lack of solutions, and some are more expensive than others. I know that even now there's a couple of companies that have devices that can that can identify if you are too close to someone on a job site, that will actually ding your hard hat or an actual device on your wrist that will say, hey, you're too close to someone, you need to move back. And that will be monitored, and that will be actually kind of written down as a data point for supervisors to know. And then I always get asked about drones. Simply put, drones help go places that people can't sometimes, and it's a great solution to keep everyone kind of up to date with what's going on a job site. But I also I think it's safe to have people going in to unsafe areas. Anything we can do to kind of curb that a little bit is always helpful.
Thanks, Matt. And there's definitely no shortage of safety technology available. And it's interesting how this kind of plays back into the workforce retention topic as well, because safer conditions can certainly be a recruitment tool as well for the younger generation, both in learning how to use the safety technology, because that's attractive to learn how to use this really advanced technology, but also just to know that they're going to be safer on the job. So they're all definitely tied together. Thanks all of you for those insights on safety. I do want to make sure that we hit all of the topics that we had planned to discuss today. So we're going to jump ahead a little bit to our last topic regarding resilience, and then we can definitely come back to, I've seen a couple of questions in already regarding safety in our Q&A, so we'll pop back to that topic in just a second. But moving on to our final topic here, we want to talk about resilience. So we want to know, how can you set up your company to withstand uncertain and difficult times like we've seen over the past year with COVID? So Steve, why don't you start us off here and tell us what can companies do to balance the need to win projects while ensuring profitability in unstable and uncertain economic times like these?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question that could be looked at from, I think, a few different perspectives, but I'll just take a shot at, how I kind of interpret that question. There's always a balancing act. When times are good, you have the money to go and hire many great people. And a lot of times what happens is sometimes you may come across a really excellent candidate and maybe not have a role for them at that very moment, but maybe have an idea of what they might be able to do in the future. And when times are good, you have a chance to be able to bring those people on and kind of figure out where they fit later. As things become less certain and the economy maybe takes a turn, or there's some sort of a major event, that certainty of the next job being won, or the next quarter being profitable isn't maybe so guaranteed. So I think taking the opportunity to really invest very heavily in hiring the right people, incentivizing those people in a way that when the company is successful, they are successful, so that they can share in the wins, but also participate in not maybe participate in the losses, but also understand that good fortune isn't always guaranteed. So we've always been really successful with hiring who we feel are the best people, but also giving them an opportunity to share in the success of the company as a whole, which means that in some years and in some quarters, maybe we don't do as well as we had in previous years, and that's the understanding that you're going to participate in the waves and the ups and downs of the economy. And we've seen even amongst our customers, and we have lots of customers that are employee-owned companies. And they have programs in place where those employees are basically shareholders of that company, in effect, and they participate in the wins and they participate in the losses. But I think people really value the shared responsibility or the shared ownership of participating in the ups and downs. And we've really been successful retaining people that way. And I know a lot of our customers that have similar models with more of an employee-owned structure, they've also had success as well. And you end up having employees that will stay long-term because they see the value in staying long-term because they're participating in those wins.
Great, thanks, Steve. Chris, how about you? What are your thoughts on this?
Oh, I would agree with what Steve's saying. It's a different world right now than what we've ever experienced. No one's ever gone through this. And so when you look at where it is, you have to have ownership, you have to have building, you have to have leadership that trickles down all the way. And when laborers see that, and they see all the way from the top down, out there working in the field, talking, how are you doing, everything else, that's what builds that organization. And it's a dire need right now. We have to do it as a business.
Thanks, Chris. And to kind of close us out, Matt, do you have any last thoughts on this?
No, I think they hit on it. I think I think going back to a lot of things we said before, I think understanding that technology can be something that helps your business, but to keep your to keep your organization constantly, innovating and being able to, use technology, like I said, to win work, to make yourself more profitable and to be safer. That just goes into the constantly understanding that it is an overwhelming space out there, and making sure that you understand the needs of your business and that you're evaluating them constantly, looking internally. That's going to really help you understand what technology foundation you need going forward to keep your business not only retaining good talent, but to be a resilient organization for the future.
Okay. This was a really, really great discussion. All of you, thank you so much for sharing all your thoughts and your insights and expertise. I do want to take a few moments and hopefully get to address some of these audience questions. So first, I mentioned, I think it's critically important that we talk a bit more about safety. And I wanted to know, we didn't want to base this entire discussion around COVID and the impact of COVID, but it obviously has been a very, very disruptive occurrence within the last year. And so as far as safety and job site productivity, what can contractors do to limit the impact of COVID on the job site? And Chris, why don't we go to you first?
That's a loaded question. It's challenging because, again, nobody has a playbook for it. And so I think, per job, per organization, per county that you work in, per state that you work in, and nationally or internationally, you have to come up with the right plan that's going to work. And again, it could very well be a shell game in terms of coming up with the right processes. It's R&D, and you're gonna make change all the time. So that's what it comes down to. It's just it gets back to safety, making sure that everybody is as safe as possible.
Thanks, Chris. Steve, anything to add there?
At this point, I actually really like the points that Chris made. I don't really have anything of material to add for that one.
Okay, Matt?
I think the important thing to note is that, especially when it comes to safety and COVID, within ABC, one of the most asked for presentations is the one on safety technologies and COVID-19 technology solutions. So, again, there's a lot out there. There's a lot that can help people, but I think there's a reason it's being asked for. People want to be able to have have continuous operations during this time and understand how to keep their people safe.
Okay. Well, I think that's probably about all we have time for here today. So once again, I just wanted to thank all of you for hopping on and sharing in this discussion with us. Thank you to all of our panelists for your expertise. And we hope you guys found this presentation valuable. This was a lot of great discussion, so we appreciate it. We'd like to thank CMiC for sponsoring today's discussion. And again, Matt, Chris, Steve, thank you so much for sharing all your insights, and our attendees, thank you for your great questions. Please take a moment to subscribe to Construction Executive if you haven't already, and follow us on social media from constructionexec.com. Within the next couple of days, you'll be sent a follow-up email with a link to this presentation. Thanks again, everyone, very much for your time and attention today, and we hope you found this webinar valuable.